afternoon.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, quality management systems. Objective of the subject. The student will be able to prepare, control, and audit documentation and implement new quality systems in accordance with the different applicable quality standards. What key competitiveness based on continuous improvement. Okay. That is why we are getting here to achieve this objective. And I have organized for you, students, this brilliant conference titled Interpretation of the ISO 9001 version 2015 standard and its currently evolution. But first, I want to welcome all of you and the authorities that accompany us today. Sistemas de gestión de la calidad. Objetivo de la asignatura. El alumno será capaz de elaborar, controlar y auditar documentación e implementar nuevos sistemas de la calidad con apego a las distintas normas de la calidad aplicables para lograr la competitividad basada en la mejora continua. Es por ello que estamos aquí reunidos para lograr este objetivo y he organizado para ustedes, alumnos, esta brillante conferencia titulada Interpretación de la norma ISO 9001, versión 2015 y su evolución en la actualidad. Pero antes quiero darle la bienvenida a todos ustedes y a las autoridades que nos acompañan. Se encuentra la doctora Juana Elizabeth Medina Álvarez, coordinadora del programa académico de Ingeniería Industrial. La profesora Angélica Julieta Salvador, del área de idiomas y mi maestra de inglés. El doctor Gustavo Hernández Martínez, rector de nuestra universidad. Y por supuesto, nuestro conferencista, el doctor Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez. A continuación, les daré el protocolo de presentación del doctor Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez. Experience. Doctor Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez currently works as coordinator of cryptography and information security models en ITESO, Universidad Jesuita de Guadalajara. In addition, he is a collaborator of the company KM Consultores, which is dedicated, among other things, to give consultation on quality management system to the companies. Has collaborated in CONACYT for 5 years, a researcher in projects related to cryptography, information security. CIMBESTAT for 3 years, 6 months, as researcher in optimization of bilinear pairings and pairing-based protocols implementation. Yes, and Awak, 8 years as part-time teacher and 8 years as network administrator. Is very grateful to introduce you to Dr. Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez. Me es muy grato presentarles al doctor Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez. Le voy a leer un poquito de su experiencia. Actualmente el doctor Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez trabaja como coordinador de módulos de criptografía y seguridad de la información en el ITESO Universidad Jesuita de Guadalajara. Además es colaborador de la empresa KM Consultores, que se dedica, entre otras cosas, a dar consultoría en sistemas de gestión de la calidad a las empresas. Ha colaborado en CONACYT por 5 años como investigador y en proyectos relacionados con criptografía, seguridad en información. Ha colaborado en Simvestab por 3 años, 6 meses como investigador en optimization of bilinear pairs and pairs-based protocols implementation. En Yes Anáhuac ha trabajado como profesor de tiempo parcial por 8 años y como administrador de redes también por 8 años. Antes de cederle el micrófono al doctor Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez, le voy a ceder la palabra a nuestro director, el doctor Gustavo, para que nos exprese sus comentarios al respecto.
Muy buenas tardes, mi querido maestro Esteban, te mando un gran saludo. Saludo también con muchísimo gusto a la coordinadora de la carrera, la doctora Elizabeth, y por supuesto saludo con todo gusto al conferencista. Me es muy grato participar de este encuentro porque yo pienso que la universidad tiene el propósito de ser un agente vinculante. Y yo creo que tú tuvieras, profesor, la oportunidad de dar tus clases en el aula de una forma tradicional o como lo estamos haciendo. Pero en vez de eso decides ir un paso adelante y ese paso adelante es hacer de este espacio un espacio en el que se propicie un encuentro con personas destacadas, con personas que tienen amplia experiencia en los temas que competen a la materia. Y entonces lo que estás haciendo es romper las paredes del aula. Yo creo que si el conocimiento se queda en el aula, yo creo que si las clases y todo el esfuerzo que un maestro hace para preparar una clase y todo el esfuerzo que hace un alumno para estar ahí en la clase también, no tiene sentido si se queda dentro del aula o dentro de una plataforma como esta. Por eso es importante sacar el conocimiento y celebro mucho que tú tengas esta disposición y que tengas el apoyo de la coordinadora y por supuesto quiero reiterarte y reiterarles a todos que tienen el apoyo del rector. ¿Por qué? Porque queremos que nuestra universidad siga fortaleciendo. Queremos que la universidad siga creciendo y como lo he dicho en otro momento, la generación de la pandemia nos ha enseñado que no hay límites y que nada nos va a limitar y que vamos a hacer las cosas bien. Y no tenemos más que dar respuestas institucionales de la misma calidad. Entonces, muchas felicidades y muchas felicidades de antemano al conferencista. Muchas gracias por estar aquí y les mando un gran saludo a ustedes, el equipo docente. Les mando un gran saludo a los alumnos que son nuestra universidad, que son nuestra comunidad universitaria. Y les reitero que nuestra universidad es grande y es grande por el valor de su gente. Un abrazo.
Thank you. Okay, it's very, very grateful to introduce you to Dr. Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez. Welcome, doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. Let me share my screen. Right. It's now on. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Sure. Thank you very much. Well, today we're going to talk about the ISO 9001. This norm is for certification of quality management. Its last revision was in 2015, and it has introduced some changes quite different from previous versions. And around year 2012, all of the ISO norms start to have the same structure with some defined chapters. Of course, there are some ISO norms who have some different chapters because that's independent from their own field, but they have more or less the same structure. So let's start. So this is this kind of timeline for quality systems evolution. We started with quality as a whole around the 1950s in Europe and in the States, and through the next 30 years we have something called quality control. Quality control by the time was the main deal, and the thing is that they focus mainly on correcting issues and the inspection of the product. Which this means that for them, they have to fix something, it is broken, but the only way to have a proper detection of an error is by inspection. So this whole thing continued for several years. So if you have some issue, it depends entirely on one single person or any amount of inspector we have in a company to visually detect an error in a product. So that's what they used to have as quality control, and it worked fair enough for a few years until the late 80s. In 1987, we changed it from quality control to quality assurance. We still were working on corrective. I mean, we have some issue that was detected, but we just make correction of the product, or we change it or whatever, and we give the final product without any error. But for this, instead of relying entirely on the inspection or an inspector, we now have some specific controls. Obviously, it will depend on the product that will lead us for prevention. So around late 80s, we now have some sort of prevention controls in our company in the production lines that let us detection or avoiding to have an error in our product. Then if we have some error, of course we do the correction. Well, they used to do the correction, but with the prevention, well, there were less corrections being done, but still there are some small issues. Then we started in the year 2000 with quality management. So that's entirely a different posture. In this case, we prefer to do some management of the quality, in the sense that any issues around the production of the product were actually being observed, and we have some kind of different treatment. In this year, we started to have some process approach. We started to have procedures and essentially we have some procedures. All of the companies were told that if they have procedures, they have to follow, and if they follow that procedure, then the product will come with quality, without errors or with the minimal errors as expected. And additionally, we have now the introduction of continuous improvement. With continuous improvement, with this trend came from Japan usually, we have some errors still in the product, but since we are following a procedure and we can prevent and detect more errors, then we want now to make a better product. So with continuous improvement, we started to change the product slowly based on our processes or procedures. And if we detect something that we were doing wrong, then we change the procedure or the process to have a better product. And that's what they told. If we have procedures, then we will have a quality product. But that wasn't enough. You know, the continuous improvement has some limitations. I like to pick this. I'm not sure who's this quote, but it's essentially, you know, the light bulbs. The light bulbs were not invented, but continuous improvement of candles. I mean, candles. If we have candles and we continue improving the candles, we have larger, better candles. We will never reach to have a proper light bulb. So continuous improvement, of course, it gives you a better product, but it won't give you the next stuff. Nevertheless, we still have now quality management around the year 2015 from the ISO 9001. Well, we started to have this new approach. Actually, all of the ISO norms changed a bit, as I said before, starting from 2012. We now have a business approach and we have risk-based thinking. What's the difference between the process approach and the business approach? Well, the thing is that we have to take care of the business of the company. It's not only the product, but also the service. So we not only have a product, we also have a service to give to our clients, and we have to take into account what they need and how we can help them. And of course, this has to be aligned with the company's vision, mission, and all that, because otherwise we won't have a company at the end. The other main thing we have is risk-based thinking. Instead of having prevention and inspection, we still have continuous improvement, but now instead of having thinking about what could go, instead of avoiding the problem that we will have now an approach risk-based. With this, we essentially have to think about what could go wrong and define which of these things that could go wrong we should address before and which one we should take after. Because we have a limited amount of money and we can't fix everything, depending on our business, and we have to take care of the business, we decide which risk we should take before, and then we start working on that, and let's do some improvements on our product based on that. All right, I see. So what are the difference between the previous version? The previous version was the ISO 2008, and the current version is 2015. It's a long gap. It's about 7 years. Of course, it's not that we just change from 1 year to another. I mean, we have some changes. As I said before, in 2012, actually 2013 in some cases, we started to change the structure of the ISO norms. So we actually have some review after 4 to 5 years, but they decided not to change the ISO norm on quality management. They decided to change it until the year 2015, once these new changes were mature enough. And again, we had some review in the year 2020, but thanks to the pandemic and that actually the norm is working perfectly fine, we didn't have an update on the ISO norm. We will have some years later. We do expect to have some changes in the year 2025 at the latest. Probably we'll have something new a bit before. Anyway, the 2008 version, this has the scope of the norm, the usual references to other norms that may supply some information or some structure or some ideas to what to do with the quality management, and the terms and definitions. This actually isn't really part of the ISO 2009, ISO 9001, I mean. This information comes in the ISO 9000, which usually contains the definitions. in the ISO 9001, we start with all of which is the norm actually. So we used to have on chapter number 4, quality management system, which it just talks about all of the requirements we need to have for an actual management system to have, what it's going to have, what do we need to do, and the roles and responsibilities and all the stuff that we need to set up before the administrative part. Then we have in chapter 5 the management responsibility, which was usually focused on the high management. We usually used to have that term actually, the high management. So actually, it could be either the main boss of the company or the owners or some other individuals who have high rank in the company, but they have some limited responsibility actually in the 2008 version. Then chapter 6 we had resource management. What do we need to have to implement our quality management system? In chapter 7 talks about, well, the product realization, which is essentially what do we need to do to have the management system ongoing. And chapter 8 they just mixed everything, measure, analysis, and improve it in just a single chapter. For the 2015 version, which is the current one, well, we again have the scope, normative, and references. It's available in the ISO 9000, and then we have the rest in the ISO 9001. We have the new chapter 4, which is the context of the organization. We need to check what's around the company. What do we do? What to produce, what are the laws, what are the norms in our country that we need to follow, what are the departments and areas which are required to take into account to make their products. So in chapter 4, they ask us to have this information in one or several documents, but perfectly documented. Now in chapter 5, we have some change between management responsibility to leadership. We need now the high management to be actually involved in the quality management system. We have so many companies that when we as an external auditors went to the company to see what's going on the system, it was so common that the manager wasn't there or wasn't available, or they actually leave the company to other place, or they get out because they didn't want to get involved in the audit of their process. Then we have this big deal because then now after the 2015, well, they have to be there and we have to audit them and they have to show they're really involved in the system. How do we have this? Well, they have to assign roles and especially responsibilities and authorities to the quality management system administrators. Additionally, they have to show proof, they assign resources, and they have talked in their annual meeting at least about the performance of their quality management system. That way, we get for sure that they get involved and they actually know what's going on and how can they help. And of course, well, they also can decide they stop following the ISO 9001 if they don't see any results at all. In chapter 6, we have now, instead of just resource management, we have a proper planning chapter. In this planning chapter, well, we have to check what do we need to have, like money for licenses, money for new production lines, money for training, money for whatever we need. Well, we need to define what we need. But we also, if we need some procedures, and we need some controls, and whatever is needed for the quality management system, well, we have this space to show proof we have done the actual planning. In chapter 7, we have the support for the quality management system. This is what do I need to do my stuff. I just said in chapter 6, the planning, well, let's say I need this and that. Well, in support, well, you have to show that you have covered that stuff. For example, if I'm working in a chemistry plant, there in Altamira. Well, actually, if I want to be checking some procedure on chemistry, well, there should be something in the human resource department that says I'm qualified to supervise or to operate the chemistry department of my company. If I don't have the qualities or the qualifications to operate, then they need to show that they are working on that and have been taking some courses, training, or whatever is needed, and that I'm going to have some ability at some stage. And that's essentially the chapter 7. Chapter 8, we have the operation. And in operation, what we mean is, well, we need to do something about it. So we need procedures, we need processes, we need to measure stuff, then we have to implement it. So in chapter 8, you have to show that you have created the procedures, you have defined your controls, and that you actually are implementing them. So if it says, okay, there's a procedure to open a valve, and then I'm using that procedure to open a valve, then there need to be some proof that I'm following that procedure. How can we know we're following that procedure? Well, there are many ways we can do it. We can just record, we can take the logs of the measurements of the valve or whatever thing. Also, we could include the audit of the procedure where someone else is verifying that we follow the actual procedure, not only one or twice, but at random times. Chapter 9 works about performance evaluation. We actually had that in the previous version, but now it's completely, it has its own chapter in performance evaluation. What we actually have to measure and that have all that stuff, and what we say we were going to measure in chapter 8, well, we now have the records and a lot of that stuff. But we also verified that we're getting into the goals we defined previously in chapter 4. In chapter 4, we define our goals for the product. Well, in chapter 9, we have to say, hey, we are actually getting the goals on the quality of the products. If for some reason we don't get the goal, well, there's chapter 10, which is about improvement, and then we can make any corrective actions that needed. So depending on the product and the procedure, well, we can make some changes. Maybe the guys doing the product, it wasn't properly trained because, well, we're in pandemics, and he took the course online and he didn't have the proper training. Well, let's bring it to the lab and let's do some tests and let's see if he performs better next time. So essentially, that's the main difference on the between the two versions, 2008, 2015. We need to analyze better this whole planning phase, the context of the organization, what we need to get, what we need to do, where are we, where we want to go. The leadership. The bosses should be involved and should give us authority actually in the system or in the company to implement the quality management system and the whole planning thing around our process. Well, so moving. All right. So this is another diagram of the ISO norm. We have the quality management system here. I think I accidentally, yeah. But let me just clean that. Clear. Well, there's going to be a line there for a while. So the quality management system is defined here. We have the famous plan, do, act, Plan, do, check, act. PDCA from Demi, with a history about how we should do quality management. We start with doing the planning. So then we do the stuff we have to do. We check or verify we're actually working properly. And if there's something else to be need to correct it or to improve, then we do the act. So we start first with our inputs, the organization and its context, the customer requirements, what the customer wants, what the customer needs, and of course, well, there's also the needs and expectation of interested parties, which are usually the customer, but could be also the government, local government, and maybe the stockholders, or even in some cases, our providers may have something to say. So these are inputs. What are we, where we are, what I want to sell, what do we want to sell, and the stockholders. We use this as an input for our quality management, and we start with the planning. Well, actually, the leadership is at the center now, and we do some planning to do this product. We plan, we give support, and the required operations. This is all the process we need to have, and we do them, we implement them, and we verify in chapter 9 or performance. We verify we're doing work, that's the check. And if we need to do some improvements, well, chapter 10 is going to help us. What we have as an output? As an output, we usually would like to have customer satisfaction. That's one of our main goals. We have products and services, and of course we have the result of the quality management. Essentially, we have some final product, of course, but we want our customers to be satisfied with the products, and we also want, as part of the quality management system, to have proper results. That is, if we have good results on our quality management system, we should have good products and services and the customer satisfaction. So that's the Deming cycle, the PDCA. Plan, do, check, and act. Right? And we can map the plan, do, check, and act to the ISO 9001 version, in 2015 version. Chapter 4 is the context of organization, leadership, planning, and support. That all the planning part. The do is about the operation of the system, operation planning control, determining market needs, plan external provisioning, good services, etc. And chapter 9, performance and evaluation, monitoring, measuring, analysis, evaluation, internal audit, and management review. And the act. So we have the improvement parts, which is non-conformity and corrective action, and the continuing improvement we have talked about before. Right. So what are the main changes? The main changes for this version is the business approach. We didn't have a proper business approach. We still have actually the process approach. We have the process approach from version 2008, but we keep it. We just make it stronger. And we now have risk-based thinking. We think about the risks of the company. For this to work, we need some experience. We need to think that, I mean, what things will go wrong, then we try to fix that. And we have products and services. Before we have products or services, we have to think now about products and the service. If I make one very nice product, but I don't follow up to the client, then I'm not giving a proper service. And despite having the best product, then the client won't be satisfied. So now we have products and services. in this new version. And of course, the leadership and commitment that is now crucial, central part of this version. Let me see. Fine. Now the system elements, we talked about it. We have the context organization, which gives us details about stakeholders, and they give you information about the scope and the procedures, and that should give you an idea of what risks and opportunities we have in our company for our product and services, and then we create the documentation. So we have these system elements: the context of the organization, the stakeholders, and for the clients, the scope and the processes we need to take into account to work to create the proper product and service, the risks and opportunities in the area, not only about the product. For example, now we have the pandemics. Well, there's also an opportunity to give remote talks. I didn't have to travel to Altamira. I'm in Guadalajara right now. So that's an opportunity. And of course, another thing to do is the documentation of the whole system. Now, the change in the context organization. Well, we have the external context of the company, which is the political, economical, social, technology, environment, legal, and the whole competencies of company that needs to have. The internal context is the culture of the company, the values, and the historical performance in developing products of the company. The stakeholder could be customers, the shareholder, they have the money, the community in general around us, the personnel, the people that make your company, and of course the suppliers. Point number 4.3, products and services, which is the things we can see, the products and the batch and the packing, and what we can't see, the deliveries, the transport, and any technical service after sale. From leadership, we have, of course, we need to define a strategy. We need to approach the customer. We need to manage the resources we have available. I mean, how much money do I have? How much people do I have? How knowledge they have? And machinery I have? Well, I have to do something with that. I mean, sometimes they're limited. And how can I measure them for my company? So we have this intersection here between the leadership and commitment, the quality policy of the company, and what can people do and what I'm going to give them to my people to make the product. For planning, we have three main areas. We have actions to address risks and opportunities. For this, we usually have another ISO, the ISO 31000 and 30010, which essentially define risk and define methodologies to identify risk and to do some training about it. We have to define the objectives of quality, and we have to plan how to reach those quality objectives. So this is if I want to have, I don't know, 3.4 defects per million, well, what do I have to do? I mean, is it possible? If it's possible, then we have to do the planning on how to reach them. And of course, if I have some changes going on on day basis, well, I also have to do the planning about it. For support, we talked about the human resources, the people, what they know, what they can do, and what experience. If they don't have experience, they don't have training, well, then what I'm gonna do? Once the guy is in the company, it's my responsibility to train him, to give him experience, and in some cases education. So it's now my problem. I have to fix all the competencies they require to be a good person in my company. That's my deal. and the organizational knowledge. That's it. How do we as a whole can do? There's also the awareness of the company about quality. So everybody in the company should be aware and should be conscious about the main thing to do is quality products, customer satisfaction, and of course some revenue to stakeholders. Communication, we have to disseminate the quality policy to the whole company, and so everybody is aware about it. In support, we also have the informational system where we store all the procedures and all the knowledge of the company. Now, the most important value of the company is the information. So we have to document it and provide some support for this documentation, keep it updated, and give it to everybody who need them to make nice products. The infrastructure we have and the whole environment is not restricted to the operations, but also to the surroundings. And of course, in support, well, what do we have for monitoring, measuring, and of course, bringing everything in place. The operation, well, we need a quality plan. So what we're gonna do, what is the quality we want to reach, as I said before, what the customer needs. We need sometimes design and develop. Not all the companies design, some just develop, some just assemble, it depends. We need to control what is external to us. I mean, if there's a supplier failing us, it's our responsibility to the customer still. I mean, you may recall that big issue with an electricity company that failed, and it was several hours with a blackout. And they say, oh, well, it was the supplier. No, it was the electrical company who failed because they didn't have a plan to supply electricity. So the ISO 9001 define it as we have to bring to the customer electricity. But they just say, oh, we don't have the product. Oh, well, let's cover here. Production and service control is in 8.5 and 8.6, release of product and service, and the non-conforming outputs, of course, have to be taken into account here in the 8.7 in chapter 8. Chapter 9, performance evaluation. As I said before, the monitoring, the internal audit, and of course the management review. The management has to review the performance of the management system. Is it working to provide higher quality products, higher satisfaction? Then we're on the other side. Improvement. Well, yes, of course we have improvement. We have to do actions, corrective, in case we have a non-conformity of the product, and there's an extra circle here, and the continual improvement, all that part of improvement. So chapter 10 talks about continual improvement and the non-conformity and corrective actions. Well, actually, there's one missing here, is the audit review. It's also here, it's missing. That's it. That's essentially the main parts of the norm. So what disappears in the 2015 version? Well, the term quality manual, it's no longer a requirement. You can, of course, you can have a quality manual if you want to, but now you don't actually need a quality manual. You need now a quality policy. A quality policy that everybody in the company knows about and know what to do. What's the grain of salt for the quality of the product. There's no longer a representative of the quality management team. I mean, this goes now for the leader. The leader of the company is now in charge. We no longer have preventive actions. We have risk-based management. So we think about the risk. and we do some tasks to avoid them, to transfer, to outsource them, or whatever we need to do, but we think about the risk. Now, there's no longer the word skills in competition. We now have competence. And well, we no longer have documents and records. We have what is actually there, documented information. And there's no longer a mandatory procedure. We, the company, we define what the procedures, well, actually, what are the procedures to include. We no longer need to add everything. What does it reinforces? We now have a stronger process approach. We have information, documented information, and when I say documented information, I actually mean we have to review the documents and we have to approve them, and someone has to sign. The one who created the document have to sign the credit, the one who review it, and the one who approve it have to sign. All of them have to sign, and we have to have a control version of every single document to take in place, and we need to tag every document and to identify them properly. We also have commitment in the leadership. This is reinforced now. This is no longer a representative. It's the leader, the high management has to be involved. It also integrates with provider ownership. This is I'm responsive of my supplier to the client. So if there's something wrong with my supplier, I have to find a new supplier and talk with my client about it. We now focus on the business. I mean, well, yes, we have to satisfy the client, but if the company is going to be destroyed, well, we need to talk. We have risk-based thinking to detect any risks, of course, in the process, for products, for services, for the environment, for the current law. Well, we have to detect them in advance and make change. We have to integrate the organizational knowledge. So what I have in my people, what they need, I'm going to help them. The context, well, we talked about that a lot, the stakeholders, the change management, and the controls against human error is also now as part of the new 2015 version. And well, that's all I wanted to present. I don't know if you have any questions. We still have some minutes still.
Okay. Students, do you have any questions? If you have any questions, can write on the chat. Okay. Ciel, do you have any questions, please?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
For the conference, I think it's good. It's a good conference. I have a question only. Will you add or remove anything for the new version of the ISO?
What's going on from the next version, you mean? Yeah, well, I think the risk-based thinking needs to be tuned up a bit more, and we also need to be much more explicit about the environment. There's of course norms, ISO norms about the environment, but I think it needs to be included here as part of the ISO norm. That I would say that that's two of the main things about it, and it's not sale actually because it wasn't focused on that. But I think that it also needs more about business continuity. There's also an ISO norm about business continuity, but there are some other ISO norms who took into account business continuity. And what I mean with business continuity, I mean disaster recovery. I mean, what if there's a hurricane in the zone? How is it gonna affect the operations of my company? Or well, usually in business continuity, pandemics are not included. I think they should also be included now, and I think that also needs to be included as part of the ISO norm. Business continuity, more on risk-based thinking, and more about the environment. Just a bit because there's ISO norms specifically designed for that. They should be included.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Fernando Padilla, can you?
Yes, teacher. Good afternoon. I really like the conference. I think every person needs to see this kind of conference. If that one is in a company to know what exactly do. My question is in this kind of in ISO 9001 2015. I have a question. It is how does affect all the processes before the ISO is applied.
Oh yeah, but
There is a process, a normal training process, but if the company decided to apply the ISO in all its processes, how does affect them?
well, they usually the companies already have the way to do the things. Of course, I mean, if there's a company that's already needed to do some to implement the ISO 9001, it usually means that they have a successful company and they want to include new clients because they now are requiring to have the ISO 9001. Implementing is not that cheap. It may cost a few big bucks, but the thing is that they already do the stuff and they have quality. It's just that they want some paper that says they do things in quality. So for the implementation of the ISO 2001, what we have to do as a consultant is to go one by one of the process that need to be standardized and check what they do. We actually go there and write down on pen and paper or tablet or whatever, and to see what they do. If they do it the same way, then we're done. We just have to formalize it in an actual document, either Word, Excel, or whatever. We just go and see what they do. I mean, we're not going to change the way they do, because if we change the way they do the stuff, their quality may change. So they actually have quality or some sort of quality. We first standardize that, and once it's standardized, then we try to improve their procedures, proposing new modifications or whatever. But that's the deal. The first is to document what they're actually doing right now, and we start from there. We measure, we say you have this quality level of this number of defects on your product. This is your actual customer satisfaction, and you want to improve them. What's your goal? Then we analyze what you have. So essentially, when a company doesn't have the ISO 9001, it's because they either need help because they don't have a proper standardized procedure, and we just write it down how they do the stuff, check if they do the same, make them do the same, and that's their procedure. If they only need the paper, well, then it's easier. Then we just need to verify that they actually doing the same thing and they have it documented. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And another one,
Me?
Alexis, please.
Yes, teacher. I want to ask you, what is the biggest challenge to implement the ISO 9001?
Well, actually, it's money. Excluding money, the main obstacles on implementing the ISO 9001 in a company is that most of the people think they're gonna be fired if they have some non-conformity in their product. That's the classic. That everybody thinks, okay, if they're going to do an audit on me or check what I'm doing, and if they detect I'm not doing properly or if I'm not doing, they're gonna fire me, and then people start not cooperating when we are doing the implementation. But that's actually not the case. What we want to do is to check what is failing and trying to detect why they have failed. And then, well, we just make corrections like proper training. Usually, proper training, or they don't have the tools, or they don't have enough time from the management. That's usually the case. Of course, there's some cases that people they don't do the things, and well, they will eventually someone will get fired. But if that's the case, but that's usually the main fear. People fear they're gonna get fired.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Julian. Mr. Dr. Elizabeth will give you a recognizing, okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Julian. Thank you for sharing with us your knowledges. It's a pleasure to me this day to give you a recognized for the university, and this is the recognized for us, and say that la Universidad Politécnica de Altamira otorga el presente reconocimiento al doctor Luis Julián Domínguez Pérez por haber impartido la conferencia Interpretación de la Norma ISO 9001-2015 y su evolución en la actualidad. Firma nuestro rector, el doctor Gustavo Hernández Martínez. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And fue un gusto volverte a saludar.
Igualmente.
Okay.
Gracias a ustedes.
Dr. Dominguez, thank you very much for this brilliant conference. I'm sure that it will be very useful for the students, and I hope this event don't be the last event, okay? That's all for this event. I hope you are grateful students, and I'll see you for the next class. Thank you very much for joining with us.
Bye.
Bye bye.